Hi and welcome to School Shorts with me, Melissa Chan-Green, journalist and mum of two with an interest in all the things that feed into learning. Not long ago, we did an episode on nutrition. I was thinking, yeah, this is a factor, not realising how wildly popular that episode would be. But what we focused on there was nutrition from the age at which our kids have started school. And we know that health outcomes and brain development begins much, much earlier than that. So in this episode, we're taking it back a step. And we're speaking with Gina Urlich. From maternal health to nurse to clinical nutritionist, we talk about all the things that Gina thinks we should be more aware of and what her issue is with food labelling. Well, Gina, thank you so much for your time. It's really lovely to be able to talk to you. And I know you come at this topic from a number of different paths. So I'll first just ask about your personal journey.
Yeah, so I guess right from leaving school, I was really interested in health and I went straight into a career in nursing and spent 10 years working in the Mater Mothers Hospital in South Brisbane. And for me, I loved working in the hospital, but I was also coming up against, it didn't feel like it really aligned with my values as well. And I was seeing a lot of women. I was in a maternity ward and a gynae oncology ward, and I was seeing a lot of women presenting with quite severe symptoms or diseases that they were getting symptoms for decades in advance to getting to where they were, and they didn't understand what these symptoms their body was telling them. And I just thought, there's so much we can do here with education and kind of preventative medicine. But then on the flip side of that, there were women presenting in hospital with gestational diabetes, and we were serving them diet jelly and cornflakes. And I thought, man, this really isn't right either. So I went and did a Bachelor of Health Science and Nutritional Medicine and really sunk my teeth into preventative medicine, which then naturally evolved into women's health. So I feel like that background really just gave me a really nice foundation to then leverage into the preventative medicine and natural nutritional medicine as well.
It's so funny you say that about the gestational diabetes, because I had that with my second child, with my daughter. And I was just looking back. I wanted to look at some early baby photos of her the other day. And I remembered there were some pictures of white bread and jam and jelly and all this stuff. And I thought, why am I taking photos of that? And I realized it was because I had been so conscious of eating, really healthy in that pregnancy. And yeah, as soon as I had her, this is what was served to me. And I remember taking photos thinking, this has got to be better. There must be some better way of providing nutrition to mothers in their most crucial stage of mothering a child, right? And for nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just such a huge topic where we can have so much impact into the health of the next generation, starting at pregnancy or even preconception, and then the health of that mother through her pregnancy, and then the flow-on effect to children. And I just feel like, and it's a bit of a controversial topic, but some westernized medicine and hospital system is so far removed from health in some ways, where there could be such better food in our hospital system, but then also the education that we're giving to mothers as well, which is then the flow-on effect to the health of their children.
Yeah, totally, because there are budget constraints with hospitals too, right? And that's an issue. And budget constraints within families as well. But
absolutely,
as you say, education is at least a starting point. This is a podcast that it started out and still is really around how do we help our children to read and how do we help our children to learn. And what I am learning very quickly along the way is there are so many factors in that, and it starts, as you say, right from preconception and pregnancy. So can we talk about first 1,000 days for children? Because we hear about how important that is for their development in terms of their brain. How does nutrition play into that?
Yeah, so the first 1,000 days is from conception to the second birthday. And if we think about what's happening in those first 1,000 days, it's enormous. Like, we go from having an egg and a sperm to a 2-year-old that can walk and talk. And that's huge developmental milestones that they achieve in that first 1,000 days. And so much of that is dependent on nutrients from the maternal stores, but then also what that baby's getting in those first 2 years as well. And if we think they go from babbling to talking and then rolling to running, and all the neural pathways that have been developed in that time, we really have to pull back and look at what babies have been fed in those first 2 years as well.
And so you have 4 children yourself, so you've been through this 4 times, and as well as your background in health, what would you say are your key takeaways for parents in this?
I guess when we're starting at pregnancy, making sure mums have really good maternal stores. And if we just look at iron as an example, worldwide it is the biggest nutrient deficiency and such a preventable one as well. And I think most women are going into pregnancy already depleted in iron, and then maternal levels are very high, because we know that developing baby is pulling on the mother's maternal stores. And it's that last trimester where a baby is really laying the foundation of their iron stores. So they're storing all that iron into their liver, which then takes them to the first 6 months of their life. And that 6 months, Mother Nature's pretty clever. Around that 6-month mark is when babies start needing solid food as well. So iron stores on its own is dependent on the maternal stores. It's dependent on the length of gestation. So if we have preterm babies, they're more likely to have an iron deficiency. Things like delayed cord clamping come in there as well, which is really important for laying down that foundation of iron. And then breast milk is naturally very low because babies already have those iron stores in their liver. But when it comes to starting solids, every mouthful is so important. And if we're looking at the nutrient requirements that a 6-month-old baby needs, a 6-month-old baby needs more iron than an adult male, which is amazing if you think about their portion size. Like a little 6-month-old baby would just be having a few teaspoons, where an adult male would be having a big steak. So every single mouthful when they're first starting solids is so important to get really nutrient-dense foods in. That's also easily for their little immature digestive system to be able to absorb as well.
And what do we know about how that impacts them, say, when they get to their school years? What do we know about the relationship between those early iron stores and nutrition and their ability to learn and function when they're a bit older?
Yeah, so they're laying down the foundation with all this neurological development, and it's setting up the foundation of their brain. And if they're depleted early on, it can be irreversible as well, which is quite scary to think about. We can have an impact and try and restore these iron stores later in life, but when a baby's brain is developing and they're laying down that foundation, it's really important for their health at that current stage, but then also their cognitive development for later in life as well.
It's hard for parents sometimes when they may know this or have some idea of it, and they're having struggles with feeding their baby as well. So what would you say to those people who are, I guess, maybe in that stage and their baby's not taking to solids well, or, they're having trouble with that?
Yeah, I think babies are very intuitive, and we kind of forget that a little bit, that a baby obviously needs a lot of nutrients, but they're also very intuitive. And so if they've been fussy or they're turning their head away, sometimes they may just not be developmentally ready. So there's some really key developmental signs that we can look for when a baby's ready to start solids. And one is that they can sit up unassisted, so their core strength is nice and strong. That means that their gut's ready to absorb and digest food and move food through the digestive tract. Another little trick is to put a little bit of puree onto a spoon and you pop it into your baby's mouth. And if they push it back out, this is called the tongue thrust reflex. And we're born with this, so we prevent choking. But when they stop spitting that food back out, it means that they're ready for solids as well. So I think really lean into the signs that your baby's showing you. Feed them at times when they're not tired or irritable, and just start really slowly and be observant. It's not like this big rush where all of a sudden they met these developmental milestones and they're right onto food. Like breast milk and formula is still going to be that first form of nutrition until they're about 1. So I think not too much pressure on yourself as well to try and get this food in, because it is a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And every child is different, right? Mm-hmm. And you can take the same approach and they're going to react in different ways. You mentioned gut health, and I do want to ask you about that, but I thought before we move on, can you just suggest any good foods that are really good in terms of iron, especially for, I guess, purees or in those early years?
Yeah, so there's two kind of ways that you can feed your baby, and one is spoon feeding with puree, and then the other way is baby-led weaning, which has become very popular as well. And baby-led weaning is when you give your baby soft foods and they can pick it up and feed themselves. Or you can combine the two and do both, which is all of them are completely fine. And it's just, again, looking into how your baby wants to eat. Some babies will love being fed by a spoon, and some of them are very independent from the get-go and just want to feed themselves. And I know I used to give my kids a bit of broccoli or something to hold on to, and then just kind of slip the spoon in there when I could as well. So things that are really high in iron are our organ meats, so things like liver and also bone broth and red meat. So they're all bioavailable sources of iron that's easily digested for babies. And then also things that you can pair it with, so vitamin C, your colourful fruits and vegetables, papaya, citrus, all those kind of berries and things as well.
It's funny too, because you say that and there will be a lot of adults who go, oh, I don't fancy eating that. But at that age, they're not as fussy in some ways as adults, are they? And they're kind of actually quite open to those kinds of tastes.
Yeah, and I think this brings up something really important to talk about as well, is this window of opportunity where you can train your baby's palate to like foods other than sweet. So a baby will naturally have a sweet palate, and breast milk and formula is actually quite sweet. But when we're starting solids, we have this window of opportunity where we can give them different flavors, things that are like salty, savory, spicy even. And this is a window where we can train their palate to like things that are other than sweet. But on the flip side, if we're just giving them sweet food, then they're probably going to be favouring sweet food for a very long time as well. And that's when you can see quite fussy toddlers and children.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When you look at older children, so I know you're talking about iron being so important, particularly in those really early years or the first 1,000 days. But as we look at children who are at school age or about to go to school, how important is it then for iron, or are there other nutritional things that you need to be mindful of around that time?
Yeah, iron is one of those that is always important because it has so many functions in the body. But there's also things like choline, which is part of the neural development as well, DHA, which we find in oily fish. Vitamin D is really important, and then all those macronutrients as well. But I think when we're looking at school-age children and toddlers, it's kind of looking at the macronutrients, so protein, carbohydrates, and healthy fats. And what I tend to see in our clinic and with conversations is that lots of children's food are really carbohydrate heavy, and then they miss those essential proteins and healthy fats as well. And within the proteins and fats is where we're getting all those micronutrients, so the iron, the choline, the DHA. So I think just taking a step back, because it can be very complicated when we're looking at all these different micronutrients and how do we get all these minerals and vitamins in, is just taking it back to the macronutrients, so your proteins, which are your animal proteins or beans and legumes, eggs, dairy, and then the healthy fats, so things like olive oil, coconut oil, nuts and seeds, coconut yogurts, full-fat dairy, all those kind of foods, which are then going to supply all the micronutrients.
And getting to gut health now, are those the things that help with your gut health, or why is it important to have good gut health?
Yeah. So if we go all the way back to babies again, babies are actually born with what we call a leaky gut. And if you look at my fingers, like this is the gut lining, we want it to be nice and tight. But babies are born with this leaky gut, so that breast milk, all those healthy immunoglobulins and immune antibodies can pass through straight into the bloodstream, and that helps grow their really robust immune system. But when they get to the stage of wanting to start solids, this gut lining becomes nice and tight. We want it to become nice and tight so that they have a healthy, robust gut. And then within that, we want lots of good fermented foods so that we have a really healthy gut microbiome as well. And the gut microbiome and the gut health is responsible for neurotransmitter synthesis. So that comes back to behavioral things, concentration, cognitive development, the immune system. And we know that like 70 to 80% of the immune system's housed in the gut. So having a really healthy gut is really integral to children's development, and then also immune system support as well.
And I think we talk about this as adults, and we kind of know this as adults, but it's an important thing to remember that it starts as a child, right? And that really it's so crucial, because if it's having an impact on all of those things like behaviour and immunity, and it then feeds into how they're going to be able to respond to learning at school as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are you mentioned fermented foods. What are some examples of things that are particularly good for the gut?
Yeah, so even when babies are starting solids, you can just like dip a spoon into a sauerkraut jar and get a little bit of the juice out of the top, and then just mix that into some of their food. And that's just an abundance of really diverse microbes that will go into their food. You can use things like yogurt or kefir, sauerkraut again. Any of those ferments that come from food gives a really diverse field of microbes. Or if you're really struggling with things like immunity or eczema or something, there's also supplements that we can give as well, because every strain of probiotic has a different function in the body. So depending on what's going on, you can start with food, but if it was something that we're really wanting to kind of hone in on, then we look at supplements.
I, when my son was little, had, those little tubes that are kind of for babies that they can chew on. You can put like a solid food in there and they can chew, but the solid doesn't come out. I used to put sauerkraut in that, and he loved it.
Yeah.
And I didn't really recognize the value of it for the gut at the time. I wasn't so aware of it, but I just thought I wanted to get him used to those kinds of tastes. And he's not a sweet tooth at all. So whether that was directly related or whether it was going to happen anyway, I don't know. But
really interesting.
I recommend it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I guess looking at over my 4 kids, they've all been fed very differently as I've progressed in my career and learned. And I think about what I fed them, like my firstborn, I really didn't have a huge understanding about this. And then the last ones, like Isla Billy in Boston, where I was a qualified nutritionist and really understood this. They're all quite great eaters now, but I've just seen their different behaviours with around food, and they are all so different.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, lunchboxes. I've just started in my lunchbox journey. I have many years ahead of me, and I know you have 4 lunchboxes to make. What are some of the things that you see that commonly go on lunchboxes that make you cringe?
I think there's a lot of packaged food, and never coming from a place of judgment, because I feel like we're all just doing the best we can, and sometimes we're time poor, we're dealing with fussy children, or we're just trying to get anything we can into those lunch boxes, and they can become the bane of your existence when you're doing it 5 days a week. But I think if we, again, can just look at those macronutrients, so things like proteins and fats, even if it was a really good Greek yogurt pouch or good cheese, things that, like, I often make up a chia seed pudding and pop that in there, boiled eggs, lots of things, those kind of foods where we can get some really good proteins and fats to help support their blood sugar throughout the day. It will help with their concentration and learning, but try and just step away from too many processed and packaged foods.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of options there that were good in terms of convenience, because as you say, that is really what a lot of parents are after as well, and that's probably why those packaged foods come in. Any other little tips in terms of kind of convenient things that you might grab at the supermarket, or that would be really easy just to make up and pop in?
Yeah, I guess even if you spent an hour doing some food prep at the start of the week, I think it really goes a long way when you're building a lunchbox every day. So even if you made like a little frittata or some muffins, a little muesli slice, I'm just trying to think of the things that my kids have. Lots of pesto pasta we do. We just get some of the quinoa pasta or the the pulse pasta and just mixing it with some pesto, which is a really great thing, kind of outside of sandwiches. I feel like my kids are just not into sandwiches at the moment, so I'm trying to get really creative in getting food in. And then things at the supermarket, again, if you can get some really good, some yogurt pouches, because I know that those kids like those yogurt pouches and they are convenient. Cheese slices and things like that, seaweed, which has got great iodine in it.
Yeah, and the freezer is your friend too, right? When you do have the chance to put something in the freezer and batch make stuff, that really does help.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gina. Is there anything else you would want to add just around, I guess, the importance of setting kids up on their nutrition journey young and the impact that can have?
Yeah, I guess I always take a whole foods approach. So when it becomes complicated and there's lots of noise and there's lots of advice and education coming from different places, it can become overwhelming and it can become a confusing and overwhelming topic. So I think just really bringing it back to a whole foods approach. What were our grandparents eating? What did they feed our parents? Things like bone broth, liver, all those really nutrient-dense, like easily digested foods, slow-cooked meats, stews, soups, and vegetables, and then trying to move away from too many packaged foods that have high sodium levels, have high sugar levels, and sadly there aren't a lot of regulations in the baby category, which there really should be. They're the most vulnerable population, but kind of doing your own research around it, flipping over the packet, because the front of the pack can look very appealing, but then when you flip it over and really understand what's in those ingredients, I think that's kind of a place to start. And if it's feeling overwhelming.
Because a lot of packaging can be made to look like it's healthy and clean and raw and using all of those words. But as you say, it's the lists on the back that give the real clues, right?
Absolutely. There's a really great coalition happening in Australia at the moment, and it's called Our Kids Are Sweet Enough. And they're really wanting the regulations to become stronger. And what they're terming it is like this health halo, where brands are presenting a product that looks really healthy, and it could be pictures of strawberries and vegetables, and it says organic on the front, and instantly you'd look at that and think that's healthy. But when you really dig deeper into that product, there's 1% of strawberry, and then there's a whole heap of sugar and no nutrition in there. So I think it's a really great time for brands to become accountable for what's in the products and to have some protection around that, our really vulnerable population and what they're eating, because there is a huge increase in diet-related diseases amongst children, and we know that 2 out of 5 children are relying on these foods for everyday foods, and that's a lot. And I mean, some of these pouches have the amount of sugar as half a can of fizzy drink, and if babies are being fed that 3 times a day, there's no wonder there's dental decay and obesity.
What do you think is the solution here in New Zealand? Is it greater regulation, and would you like to see the same kind of thing that's happening in Australia happen here?
Yeah, I mean, we fall under the same umbrella, so Food Safety Standards Australia and New Zealand. It would be amazing to see some tighter regulations around sugar and actually showing that there are nutrients in the food, because first and foremost, it's not what's not in there. We want to know what's in the food as well. So I think a lot more transparency and less misleading marketing.
Gina Urlich, thank you so much. I've really appreciated your time and your expertise on this topic.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. If that topic was helpful for you and you'd like to hear more, please do like and subscribe. It sends me that feedback. School Shorts is all about supporting busy parents who want their children to thrive. Follow on social at School Shorts NZ for fun ideas, helpful resources, and exclusive giveaways.